to live stream right now. It takes
Okay, oh, I see. Okay, the meeting is now
Hold on,
streaming.
not yet.
Oh, it says, my thing says meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
There we go. Now it just says done.
Okay, thank you. I
Okay,
can't
yes,
see
go
that
for it.
kind of thing in the background. All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Oregon City Library Board at 5:33 p.m. on May 12, 2021. Let me take attendance. Cynthia Andrews here. I am substituting for David Goldberg this evening, who is ill. Nick is here. Larry Osborne here. David Goldberg is absent, and Heidi Blackwell.
Yep, Elizabeth is dropping in right now as well.
Okay. We'll just wait a second. Well, and then Elizabeth Zintner is also here. Yeah. So we have a quorum. Let's proceed. How about approval of the minutes? We have been sent the minutes in the packet. I'll give everybody a couple of minutes just to look those over, and then I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from April 14th, 2021.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from April.
Nick Dirkman has made a motion to approve the minutes from April 14th, 2021. Is there a second? Okay, Larry Osborne has seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried. Thank you. So, Greg, we'll entertain your delightful library report this evening.
I didn't prepare the delightful one. I prepared the regular one. So next month I'll do the delightful one. So thank you, Cynthia. Evening, everyone. As usual, I'm going to hit the highlights, just highlight a couple of things from the director's report. But if there are any items that you'd like me to talk about further or any other questions you have as we go along, please always feel free to ask questions and let me know. So the first thing I want to quickly talk about in the monthly statistics notes, I noted that we've added, well, one of my goals was to start adding some electronic resource usage data to your monthly statistical report. And so the first one we've added is Canopy, our streaming film service. So if you look at the statistical report near the bottom, you will see that there's a new entry for Canopy. And a reminder that Canopy is one of the library resources that operates on a pay-per-use model. So every time somebody streams a video, we get charged for it. They charge differential rates depending on whether, on a whole bunch of factors, but there's a variable cost to that every month, which makes budgeting a little challenging. But that's one of the that's one of the electronic resources we're going to start to give you information about. We'll try to add some more as we go along. One of the difficulties in the library world is every vendor does their stats differently. So sometimes it's really hard to compare apples to apples between vendors, but we'll do our best.
Greg,
yes.
With Canopy, is that meeting your expectation in terms of its usage, or?
Yes, I believe so. And I'll ask Denise to offer any additional context since she has more history with it. But I know before the pandemic, it was running us about, of course, we think about it in terms of dollars, right?
Dollars, yeah. Yeah.
It was running us about like between $200 and $300 a month. Is that about right, Denise?
In the 300s, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then during the pandemic, it went up into about the 500s, and now we're starting to come back down. So we're averaging like about 440, 450, somewhere in that area.
Yeah. And when we look at electronic resources in general, I mean, my kind of internal yardstick, especially when we're looking at those countywide ones, is if it's about $1 a use or under, that's pretty good. It's when you start seeing things that are costing you $2 or $3. At one point, we had a countywide electronic resource that the usage was like $10 per use, and we decided that's not getting used enough to justify the cost. So I will share. I looked at the Canopy has some interesting analytics in there, and I did notice that the titles that get used most frequently since we've had it are Great Courses titles, which was really interesting. So that, lets us kind of look at our physical Great Courses collection and see if, maybe there's some savings we can having one side and focus on digital. A lot of them were also related to writing. It was creative writing classes that people were really interested in. So that brings up some ideas for programming opportunities, for doing some, figuring out how to do some more support for the literary arts community. It's some interesting stuff. So
Sounds good. Thanks.
you're welcome. Other than that, there was nothing in the statistics that struck my eye. I didn't put in the report, but I will say again, I mentioned it last month, our borrowed to lent ratio continues to go in the right direction, which I'm really pleased about. I want to give kudos to staff for their efforts to be really responsive to patron demand and buying titles that help us maintain that 50-50 ratio. I wanted to share that we had a really good May staff meeting with the library staff. We had Oregon City's behavioral health specialist, Val Mugia, do a presentation and training session for the staff. Val, she has been hired by the city. She works for the, within the police department. She's a behavioral health specialist, and she specializes in helping people in crisis, connecting people with resources. She's a licensed, I will probably get her credentials wrong, so forgive me, but she's licensed in what she does. She's a professional, and she had some really good information for staff about how to take a trauma-informed care approach when dealing with people in crisis. Giving some concrete advice on how to manage some of these interactions. And it was also just really good to introduce staff to her and to let staff know that here's another resource that's available in the city to help us with some of our challenging issues that we have. So it was great to meet with her. We look forward to
Greg,
working with her.
is the plan to that, would she be coming back? Is that scheduled for her to continue with you guys, or is it more you reaching out to her when you would like to work with her? I'm just curious on how that relationship looks.
So we've got some follow-up activities planned with her. So we also, after that, we had a joint meeting with Val, Robin from Father's Heart, Officer Dan Haynes, who is the city's homeless liaison officer, Denise and I. And we kind of brainstormed on ways, ways that we can support each other and collaborate. So ranging from things like sharing policy information so that we can all communicate better behavior expectations at multiple facilities, things like sharing information so that if there happens to be a behavioral problem in one place, maybe others could utilize that information, just get a heads up that this behavioral issue might be coming their way. And Val also, volunteered to put together some information resources, so that we could create a packet that we could, distribute to folks or have available for folks. So we do anticipate working with her more closely in the future. I anticipate we'd probably have some more staff training sessions with her, but on the training front, we haven't really scheduled anything yet, but we do anticipate working with her very closely. We feel very fortunate to have her in the city, and we want to give as much of her time as attention as we can.
So
Great.
Greg,
I just wanted to say I'm excited to hear about the trauma-informed approach being, debuted at the library. That's something that we, in my organization, we put forward trauma-informed principles throughout the organization, and I'm on the steering committee. And I think it would be really interesting to do for future, perhaps an assessment of even the setup of the library from a trauma-informed approach as we're looking at engaging with diverse patrons. I think that would be something that, if Val could help us out with, could be very beneficial when thinking about the library experience for those who have been impacted by trauma, which we know is a large portion of our population.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exciting that you guys are moving that forward.
That is a great suggestion.
so I was just curious, from Greg or Denise, what's one thing that you learned that's a practical takeaway from this? What was one helpful thing out of it?
Do you want to go, Greg?
Yeah, well, my favorite, and because my brain is so full, my favorite part was she had a great acronym for how to approach people, and the acronym was TACOs. And now, if you're going to ask me what that stands for, I can't remember right off the top of my head. But the other interesting thing was, and I learned about this at a Rotary Club meeting as well, and I'm going to get the name of the study wrong, but it was basically this really long longitudinal study that talked, I think Kaiser had done it, and they had tens of thousands of people that they tracked about the trauma. They surveyed them to figure out the trauma that they might have experienced in the course of their lives. They categorized it into like drug abuse or sexual abuse or emotional abuse. And then they tracked those people's health experiences going forward. And there was a statistically valid correlation between the amount and the number and the repetition of trauma suffered with the negative impacts that we see manifesting themselves in behavioral problems. So it was really fascinating that there was really great evidence-based, data-based information that shows that yes, this trauma exists. Trauma has real impacts in people's behaviors and life experiences, and there's also ways that you can address it, and you can incorporate that into how you approach and work with people. So for me, that was the best part.
Yeah, I think for me, and we knew the first thing, and I know that we aren't always really good at it, is just consistently applying our rules. Maybe sometimes when there's a patron that's in here a lot and we all get to know them and so forth, it's easier to kind of let them slide on the rules sometimes. So we need to be more consistent with that. And then the other thing, when we've talked to Val probably 3 or 4 times now, and we talked about in the past how bad we feel when we're turning patrons away or making them leave the building because they can't follow this rule or so forth. She's like, you know what, you guys have to realize what your role in this is, and you can't solve everything. We don't have the resources to solve everything, but what we can do is find out what resources we can point them towards. At times, the only thing we've been able to do is call the police, and that makes us feel really, really bad. But Val's like, but think maybe that's the one time that they're going to be able to get that person the help that they need. So it was kind of a little different thinking. I know staff in the past, we have felt super bad that we can't do more. And so, just realizing we can only do what we can do. So even though we'd like to do more.
Well, thank you. Those were good insights. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Greg.
Oh, you're very welcome. Okay. Any other questions on that before I go on?
I just wanted to make one other point. I think as Elizabeth was saying, that the trauma-informed care or approach, I think that would make a great adult education type session also, if that could be considered, because I went to a session on it, and it really enlightened me in terms of really how I view folks, particularly those that are in difficult situations. And I think it would help others to really understand that people are out there in really tough environment, tough situations.
Yeah, we discussed at that meeting how by the time we're back open and the public can come in here, every single person has been through some sort of trauma in the last year and a half, between COVID, between the fires, it's just been trauma after trauma. So so that's why we're hoping Val can help us with that, so that we know how to deal with it, and that we can have things go as smoothly as possible. So
and I'll pass on the suggestion to our adult services team, Nick. I think that would be a really great program to explore. So thanks for the suggestion. Okay. Let's see, library grounds and facilities. So as I mentioned last meeting, in some previous meetings, we're coming out of COVID. We're trying to be responsible about the way that we reconfigure the library to make sure it's as safe as we can. We've also, there's an opportunity there to kind of address some longer standing operational challenges that we've had. And I wanted to, again, make sure that as we're thinking about these things, we bring them to you, let you know, get your feedback. And so the one we've been focusing on recently is some reconfiguration in the children's area. And it all kind of anchors around kind of one move we're thinking of making. So I wanted to present that. Some of you are probably more familiar with the children's area than others. Right now, the children's desk is kind of around a corner. So you come in, if you come in through 6th Street, you go in there. As you're approaching, you can't really see the person. There's a barrier there. You can see the circulation desk, but you can't see the kids area. And for the person who's sitting at that desk, really they can just see what's in front of them. So there's almost half the children's area, which is out of direct line of sight, which in the library world always makes us very uncomfortable. We like people at desks to have good line of sight and to be able to see what's going on in as much of the section as possible. So we kind of started brainstorming about, how we could address some of those. And so I've tried to put a picture there to visually represent it. I took out all the shelving because, it makes for a complicated display, but it's basically moving that kid's desk from where it is more to the center of the room and having the staff person facing out towards the kind of entrance to the staff room. So the idea is that as people come into the kids area, they've got a direct line of sight to the staff member at the desk, hopefully a more welcoming experience. The staff member who's sitting there has much better lines of sight to all portions of the room, both to their left and to their right. We're thinking about maybe moving the shelving around a little bit to further improve those sight lines and just make it easier for our staff member to see what's going on, to better identify when people need help, when they're looking for something that they can't find, and to basically make it a better experience for both staff and patrons. So that's one of the configuration changes we're looking at. If anybody's got concerns or feedback they'd like to share, I would love to hear it, because we really do. We love your input. We want your input and feedback on these things.
Would that be moving the computers then more, or is that kitchen area?
Yeah, so the computers, we have to figure out what to do with. The configuration of both the adult and the kids' computers right now, it's, you got 3 computers facing each other, and long term, I'm not comfortable doing that. In knowing what we know now about communicable disease and COVID and the like, that's not acceptable going forward. So we're going to have to figure out a different way to do the computers. There are certain areas of the room that have better data and power. We can always get around that. We're kind of thinking of where those computers are going to go. We want to make sure that there's still the ability for kids to come in and use computers, but we kind of have to figure out where those are going to go. The kitchen area, that's I'll be honest, that's always been one of those areas in the kids area that's been problematic. It was originally, Denise, back me up if I misspeak, it was originally conceived of as kind of like the main programming space in the kids area. For a library that has the amount of traffic that we do and 60,000 people in the service area, there's no way. I mean, there's no way that space can actually serve as a programming area. So it's never been used that way. And again, there are some health concerns about kids being really close to each other and sharing toys that they put in their mouths. And so we're kind of looking at all of that in the kids area. How do we approach that? How do we still create a really great environment where kids can play and explore, and read and explore books and have those learning experiences, but doing it in a way that incorporates what we've learned over the past 15 months and trying to do it a little more safely. So
there's just not another space like that in Oregon City, though. Literally, like, there's not another indoor space, like communal space for kids to be at and for families to be at. That would be I see that being a big pushback from patrons. I understand, absolutely. I've seen everything in everybody's mouth hanging out there.
Well,
but a balance will be important to strike.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that we are thinking about, it's something that we wanted to do in the past, and I think now is a great time to do it, is trying to tack on scheduled playtime after story times. So the idea would be that we have a story time, we go through the half hour, 45 minutes story time. We have a whole bunch of safer toys and play things. We bring those into the community room and we have a half hour, 45 minutes of playtime for people to be able to play there. We can more easily control the capacity. We can, maybe have some toys that when we're done with them, we can sanitize them, do something with. that's one way we can have that play experience. And we do know it's important that parents have an opportunity when they come into the library, they come to the kids area, that the kids have fun. So it's a challenge. It is a big challenge to figure out what the right way to go forward is. But thank you for the feedback. And as we make more plans on that, we'll of course bring it to the group.
And they did just do a big study on childhood transmission of COVID across childcares. And they found that the transmission is really, really low. And we've seen that across our programs too. So that's a positive.
It's good. Yep. I will say the other thing, just being fully open and honest with everybody, there are some things, there are toys that you can have in a play area. Some toys are more conducive to disruptive behavior than others. And so we would very much like to take an opportunity to say, we had to take the toys out based on the best information we had at the time. As we start to bring things back, maybe there are different play experiences we can have there that are less disruptive to everybody else using it, because there were some behavioral issues that we had with the way it was set up, and we would love to be able to hopefully address that and make it a more pleasant and enjoyable experience for everybody who comes in the library. So, okay. Any other comments or questions on that? Okay, we will make sure we bring some more as we get further along. We'll keep everybody up to date. Segue into transmission. I put some information there. Over the course of the past, or in the month of April, we got a whole bunch of information in rapid succession from the CDC, from the Oregon Health Authority, from Clackamas County Public Health regarding quarantine of library materials. I won't go through the whole thing. But basically, based on some CDC findings, which were validated by the state library, Oregon Health Authority, and Clackamas County Public Health, we have stopped quarantining incoming materials. So the Oregon Health Authority indicated that the risk was very, very low of transmission on library materials. Based on the current guidance from the state library, we are still having staff wear gloves and, of course, masks while they're handling patron materials. We still are having people who come in for holds, which we'll discuss in a little bit. We are asking them or offering them the option to sanitize their hands, hand sanitizer there. So we're still trying to be cautious, but we feel a lot better, with the guidance that we received from those agencies.
I just want to point out that corresponds to the experience during the Spanish flu epidemic in 1918 too. They found library books were not a significant transmitter.
Yeah. So that's where we are with that. And that segues into, that was one of the things that helped us do some browsing with our new self-service hold pickups. So on Monday, the 19th of April, we transitioned away from appointment-based hold pickups to allowing people just to come in when they need to, when they would like to. Still with the hours that we have, because we still are facing some staffing constraints. I've put some pictures there of the experience. Hopefully some of you have been able to come by the library and have actually picked things up and been able to do it. Based on the current state library guidelines, we are limiting patron to 4 patrons at a time in the hold pickup room. It's a function of math. The guidance says 120 square feet per person. That room is about 600 square feet. We reserve 1 spot in there for a staff member who can assist patrons with self-check machines and shelve more holds, and that leaves 4 patrons that we can get into and out of that room safely and make sure that we're being consistent with guidelines. Our new people counters are working really well. It's really neat to see them in action. People go in, they automatically count, they automatically keep track of how many people are coming in. When people go out 7th Street, it resets it back up. Our staff has an iPad that on the rare occasions it gets off or it misses somebody, they can easily update it. And it's been working really well for us. So, and the feedback we've gotten from patrons has been very, 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 very positive. People are just so happy to be back, have more access to the building. being able to come and pick up their holds. We have some shelves of browsing materials. We focused on new items. So we've got new items from every part of the collection in that hold pickup room. And so people are able to browse and pick up new DVD. They can still get popcorn too. We have a thing of popcorn for when they want their movie night. And the feedback has been really positive. So we are very pleased at how that's going. We will, of course, we're taking every opportunity and looking at every option we have for expanding services. And the guidance in the news from the state changes almost on a daily or a weekly basis. So it's challenging sometimes to keep up with it. But any questions on our pickup appointments? Or sorry, our non-appointments, our self-service pickups? I will say on our last day of doing pickup appointments, we've been doing it for a year. We got really good at it, but there was nobody who shed a tear that we were no longer doing it. So it was also a lot of work to make that happen. Okay, the other two things I wanted to highlight. Oh, yeah.
I actually do have a comment on that, and it was just more when I went to pick up my book. I had my son with me, and there was a question if he could come in there or not with me. Luckily, he's old enough, and so I didn't. But that's not really clear when I can see people not being able to or having an issue with not being able to bring their children in there with them if they're just picking something up. So.
Okay. We will try to do a better job of communicating that in the information that we put out there. The guidelines don't make a distinction between kids and adults, and so it's 4 people. So, and I know we have had some conversations with folks, outside. We've tried to, we had one family come in. I think there were 7 of them, and they wanted to come in. We said, we can certainly allow you to split up and do that. They weren't comfortable doing that, understandably, and so we brought their holds out to them. So we said, we're more than happy to bring your holds out to you, and thank you for your patience while we figure out, while we deal with this. When we go down to a lower status, the state guidelines say we can go down to, I think it's 80 square feet per person. So if we're continuing to do things, in that room the same way, that should allow us to get a couple more people in there at once. So. I wanted to highlight our new teen summer book box subscription. So we've been working to try to do some more for teen services, and we're excited to try out our teen book box subscription. So teens can sign up. They will get a customized book box every month during the summer, June, July, and August. The box comes with 2 to 3 staff selected recommended reads. Based on some information they give us, what they're interested in. There will be a creative kit in there as well. Our creative kit program has been really successful, so we're going to make sure teens get a creative kit to work on, as well as a few surprise items that my staff assures me teens like. I only have I guess he is a teen now, so if it were my teen, it would have to be a video game or something sugar-based, for him to like it. But they're putting in a few things in there, and so teens will be able to sign up for that. They'll come and pick them up, and our goal is, to start building those relationships with our teens. Our teen services specialist wants to get to know our teen population more closely and be able to build those individual relationships, get to know teens, help them pick books. So we're really excited about trying this out. So that started May 1st.
Is there a mechanism then to get feedback from the teens after they've had the boxes? Is there some way for them to be able to report back on how they liked the activities and books?
I am sure there is. We are working on, I'm trying to describe it without being too geeky about it. We have an online feedback form that we are developing that basically every department, we're going to have some standardized questions because we want to be able to compare feedback, compare apples to apples. And then every department, so if it's a teen program, they'll be able to add customized questions on there to include in that feedback. And if the kids department for a program wants to ask something different, they can do something different, but we can manage it all in the same place. I would like to make sure that that happens as part of this program. I assume that's part of the plan, but I can double check on it, bring you back some information next time. As part of our strategic plan, assessment of all programs is there. We want to get to the point where, yes, we are providing assessment and feedback opportunities for every program that we offer.
Deans often have opinions on things, so I feel like
Yes.
they would let you know what they're thinking.
Yes, and we did, and Denise, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we do have a teen advisory group, which, you know, they took a little bit of a hiatus during COVID, but I think they've met fairly regularly over the past 3 months. And I presume Sabrina talked to them about the teen book, you know, kind of got their feedback on, hey, this is what we're thinking about, you know, how do you think this would work? Is this something you're interested in? So, so we got some teen feedback that way, but yes, we'll make sure we get teen feedback, because yeah, they can be sometimes challenging to reach, and make sure we're providing the programs and the services that they want. And then finally, on the outreach section, and Heidi, if you want to jump in because you were there, feel free to. I just wanted to again, our youth services department had some more opportunities to work with the school district and do some outreach. One of those was meeting with school district counselors, just discussing our No Place for Hate activity, the Read for a Welcoming World program that was developed by Barrett with support from Heidi, and the response that we heard from the school counselors was very positive. There were some schools who, you know, during COVID, they had a lot going on and they didn't feel that they were able to take advantage of the program when it was first offered, but going forward, looking forward, they say that this is something that, yeah, they can really, you know, they're really looking forward to utilizing in schools and taking advantage of. And I don't know if you want to add anything, Heidi?
No, right. Yeah. So we just had opportunity to present to the counselors, and they, as far as a group that would be open and sharing some books, especially books with from different backgrounds that from the students in the schools. And so the idea was even we talked a little bit about the summer reading program, which you might be talk about this, but it is like Reading Colors Your World. So that idea of something that's already been created, where Barrett has that great video of how to pick books that represent yourself, but also people from various backgrounds. Some questions for parents, because that's, you know, so important, that those kind of guiding questions, or those questions that can really generate some good conversation. And then just, yeah, a reflection activity then to share, now that you've read this, how does it change your thinking? What would you do in, you know, a certain situation to be a better upstander? And so just having that resource there, and then kind of pairing that a little bit with the summer program, or think about next year, if schools wanted to have this available, that it would still be housed at the library and on the website, was something that the counselors were really interested in. So just kind of an ongoing resource that will be available for the schools was something that there's a lot of positive feedback on that.
Great, thank you. And yep, and with that, those are the highlights I wanted to hit. But if there's anything else anybody has questions about or wants to address, let me know.
Thank you, Greg. Are there any more questions? All right, we'll move on then to the public comments portion of the agenda. Were there any public comments, Denise or Greg? All right, then we'll move on to the discussion items. Just before we begin the discussion of the budget review, I wanted to let you know that David said that he will report out at the next meeting about the feedback that he asked from the board. So know that hasn't been forgotten, and that he's going to take care of that as soon as he feels better. So let's move on then to the 21-23 biennial budget. Greg, take it away.
Okay. I love budget stuff. I know not everybody shares that same that same perspective. So I will try to keep it as brief as possible. But if there are questions, please feel free to ask. So, you know, we had talked in previous meetings, and I sent out some information. The city budget calendar this year, just the dates that it fell on were very inconvenient for our library board meetings. So the budget committee did meet twice. They met on May 3rd and May 6th. And the budget committee did vote to approve the budget as submitted. So the next step is it will go to the city commission, and the city commission will have to vote to adopt the budget. The city commission does have some, under Oregon budget law, there are certain things they can change without, reconvening the budget committee. It's kind of a function of the dollar amount. So whether we expect things to change or not, I'll address that in just a second, but I wanted to kind of talk about, the budget that we submitted and that was approved and go over some highlights. I had sent out some information, and I know a couple of you I spoke with had questions, about some of the things in the budget. So hopefully I was able to provide some information about that. The highlights of the budget, the things that were really important to us were just the fact that this is my first full biennium at the city and as library director. So thank you very much, Denise, for walking me through the previous year's budgets. So we did take an account by account look at everything that we're spending and kind of talk through what changes we might like to see and whether this is where we wanted to be allocating those resources. One of the main things that we wanted to kind of get a better handle on was the fund balance. So not to get too detailed, but basically, every year you go through your budget process and you speculate on what your revenues are going to be and what your expenses are going to be. Budget law says those have to balance. If you spend less than you bring in, that excess goes into your fund balance. It's like your savings account, your reserves, whatever. And over the past few years, the amount, as you can see in the budget, our fund balance has gotten to about $4 million, which is a little high. So every year there's a couple $100,000 that was going into fund balance. And you always want to strike a responsible middle ground between reserving enough funds for unanticipated emergencies or things you might be saving for, and balance that with the fact that this money is coming from taxpayers to provide services on an annual basis, right? So we want to strike a good balance between those. And one of the things that I'm happy with as part of this budget process is we worked with our finance department to kind of work towards what are the expectations about what an appropriate fund balance is. Because up until now, it had kind of been, hey, you can put more in there, great. And I say half jokingly, finance people love, if you tell them you just want to put it into and save it for a rainy day, you'll always get a positive response. So we worked with our finance department and we came up with some guidelines for what our target fund balance is going to be. I put those in the staff report, and basically our target fund balance going forward is going to be 7 months worth of operating expenses. And the reason behind that is because most of our library district money comes in January. So, we just have to make sure that we've got cash in the bank to fund library operations during that time before our big tax revenue comes in. They wanted to make sure we also had a year's worth of debt service payments for the bonds in our fund, just to make sure, if anything terrible, catastrophic happened, we could still make that debt payment. And then kind of 10% of our annual operating expenses added on to that just as a contingency. And so for this budget year, that's about $2 million, which I'm very comfortable with. I think it's the finance department came up with a good target amount. That does mean that, our fund balance is higher than that. And so we're going to be looking at, what the options are for, utilizing that fund balance. I would guess at this point, some of it's going to go into reserves because we do have capital reserves. It's responsible to put money away for future repairs for the building. We have a citywide study being done on what those capital reserve and replacement needs are for all the facilities in the city. So we'll get some more information on that during the course of the year. And then, we'll talk about other possible uses of whatever fund balance, might be available for other uses. The main thing that I keep in mind when we're looking at fund balance is those are one-time dollars, and you want to make sure that if you're going to use them on a project or use them in some way, you're not establishing an ongoing expense that you can't realistically pay for and sustain going forward. So that's always in the back of our mind when we look at one-time dollars. So that was a really positive outcome of the budget process. Any questions on our fund balance? And
Just
our
to point
targets
out
going
that
forward?
if you have to have a problem, disposing of $2 million is the kind of problem you want.
It's not the worst problem to have. I don't like the fact, I have to be careful what I say. So our voters approved a ballot measure to provide library services, right? And so I think it's incumbent on us to make sure that, as responsible as we can, that we're expending that money to provide library services to the community. So I'm happy that we may have found a way to, take some, stop putting so much into our fund balance and use that for more current services going forward. So that, I think that was a really positive outcome.
So
I really like the idea that there's some guidelines for that now, so that, if we have to defend the budget to the public in any way, that there's an understandable way that we get to that point, that figure.
Yep.
And I have to admit that Greg and I did talk a little bit about this, and I personally, I find it just a very difficult that we have this money's there from the standpoint of, as Greg just stated, in terms of use of the money for providing library services. But on the other hand, I have to agree that it's nice to have the money there. I just think it's something that we have to really be focused on in terms of how we go forward. And if we have the opportunity to add more services or do more outreach, those types of things, I totally agree that we have to be careful about if we set up something that's going to be an annual expense, that we know that we can cover it, from some of the, again, it may be part of the, instead of putting it into a fund balance, that we actually expend those on an annual basis, and we plan for that over a 5 to 10 year period of time, and what that really looks like. I mean, we're fortunate to have this steady stream of monies coming in which we're really, like with most taxing situations, we're pretty much assured that it's going to be there on a year-to-year basis. On the other hand, I think it's something that we, as Greg was saying, I think it's something that we really need to look at. And I think there is one option would be at some point when we can do it, which is probably in 2 to 3 years, I guess 3 years, maybe we could pay down the bond and reduce some of our expenditure on that side. And then again, we would see a different revenue stream that, again, we might be able to provide additional services. That's just my opinion, and I wanted to make it public.
Okay. And yes, that is also, yes, that is an interesting thought to explore. Okay. The other kind of biggest change in the budget, in the proposed budget, was comparing this budget with 2 years ago budget. There's an increase of 2 FTE positions. One of those FTE positions, just because of the way budget works, this was the library technology specialist that I had brought, that we established them this fiscal year as at a 0.8 FTE position, because we desperately needed that position. So we used some, we moved some expenses around in our personnel lines during the course of this budget year to get that person on board. And this is just putting them in for the next budget cycle. Making sure that they're still in there. It looks like it's a new position because it wasn't in the budget 2 years ago. It was a mid-biennium add. So we have had that person on board since December, January. I mean, the successful candidate was somebody who had worked for us on an on-call basis. And so he is now on a full-time basis. I think he's been full-time since January, Denise?
No, he's 0.8 right now.
0.8. Sorry, yeah. So, sorry. Again, time has no meaning. It's really hard to it's really hard to get there. So that was one of those positions. And then the other position was what we're at the moment calling our library safety officer. One of the biggest challenges that we have at the library on an ongoing basis is just managing patron behavior. We've got a very extensive list of, we have a behavior policy that has a lot of behaviors that we expect from anybody who comes into the library. And, you know, Denise and I looked at the experience that we've had and the amount of staff time that we allocated towards kind of dealing with some of these behavior issues. It's significant. There are some real challenges that we've had staffing wise to be able to do this. I had serious concerns about our ability to continue to provide a really safe, welcoming environment for anybody who comes into the building. And so we looked at how some other libraries have approached this. And one of the models that we really liked was what Multnomah County does. They have, they call them a library safety officer, library safety liaison. This is not a uniformed police officer. This is not a security guard. This is a library employee. You know, they're out there shelving materials. They're out there interacting with patrons. You know, they're a library employee. They happen to have a better, more skilled and more background in some of these behavioral issues and dealing with some of these more problematic behaviors. There's somebody who the staff can go to when they feel, you know, that there's a situation that is beyond their expertise to deal with. So they have a resource within the library to help. It's somebody who can work much more closely with all those other resources we talked about, with Val, with Dan, with Father's Heart, because as much as Denise and I love to do that, our time is, you know, like everybody's, our time is limited. So we see this as a position that can, you know, really help us build some of those relationships with other organizations, can really help us get a better handle of some of the challenges we face in the library, and do it in a way that is just very welcoming to the community, helps everybody be successful using the library. So that's the other position that we proposed and included in the budget and was approved. And if there are any questions about either one of those positions, I'm happy to answer them. No? Okay. All right, so with that, if there's any other budget information you'd like to ask about or go over, feel free to ask. The one thing I did want to share, I don't know how many of you watched the budget hearings. So, and this gets a little wonky, so I apologize in advance. So as I mentioned, our primary revenue source are our district distributions, our library district tax dollars. Historically, the city has also made a contribution to the library every year out of their general fund. And you look at the budget. So this budget biennium, it's $150,000 per year. So $300,000 total that the library is receiving from the general fund. There was discussion at the budget committee about, you know, there were some questions about, I'll be honest, the questions sort of caught us off guard because it's not really the way we think about general fund contributions. There was a question for, well, what exact expenses does that general fund contribution pay for? And that's not how we treat it. That's not how our finance department treats it. It's basically a contribution that, from my understanding, was intended to help offset the fact that we are using, you know, we're using some library district distributions for that bond payment. As one of the commissioners said, it was to demonstrate that the city had skin in the game, you know, when it came to operating the library, that there was a city contribution going towards that. So there were some questions about the general fund contribution. The next step in the budget process is that the city commission, again, on June 2nd, will meet to adopt the budget. I don't know if there are going to be any further questions about the library general fund contribution. You know, of course, we will do everything we can to provide the city commission with the information that they would like. But I wanted to bring that up, you know, with the board and just share with you that those discussions and those comments were made. The other comment that was made as it pertains to the library, there was one of the items that we want to do a better job of is tracking some of these behavior issues. And so we had put in a little money for basically a software package. There's a subscription software package that's provided by a library vendor that really helps libraries kind of, when they have behavior issues, it helps you document them. It helps you have that information. If it comes to the point where you need to exclude somebody, you can make sure you're doing it in a way that's well documented and legally defensible. So we put that in as a budget request, and it's probably $2,000 a year. And that was a topic of discussion with the budget committee. And that was another one that sort of caught me by surprise. I'm not exactly sure what the genesis of it. One budget committee member did kind of express that he might have accounted for it in a different way, but I talked with our finance department, and that was the way that we wanted to account for it. So I just wanted to share that with you. So that was the budget committee hearing. So if there are any questions about that, let me know.
Greg, who's the vendor of that product?
They're hard to pronounce. Quipu, Q-U-I-P-U. It's called, it has an acronym of PITS, Patron Incident Tracking System, something like that. And so it's a web-based tool that libraries, you can put information in there and
It would seem like it would be a good tool with your addition of the safety person that would kind of coincide with that. I would think.
We think so well. We also, one of the topics that came up when we were talking with Officer Haynes and Robin and Val was information sharing. Each of us has different constraints on what information we can share, whether it's HIPAA or whether it's library privacy, rules, but having a platform where it's much easier to aggregate this information and it should help us share what we can share and help better communication between all of the people in the city who are trying to address some of these issues. So that's another reason we were really interested in it. I guess the budget committee was looking at the two. I'm not quite sure what the I'm not quite sure what the concern was. But,
All right. Are there any more questions for Greg or Denise? Okay, thank you. Then let's move on to communications. How about Nick? What do you have for us from LDAC?
Well, we didn't meet this past month, and basically there hasn't been really anything changed since last month, and we have a meeting scheduled in June, correct, Greg?
I believe June 22nd, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So that's
Right.
it.
Thank you, Nick. And I would report that the Library Foundation will not meet until the 20th of this month, so I have no report as well. So how about Friends of the Library? I'm not sure who is reporting from this perspective this month.
I think I am. And this was my first meeting at the Friends of the Library, so I need some guidance on how detailed you people want the report. In general, everything was favorable at the meeting. The financials are good. The rent went up by 2%, but is covered by the income. And if you're comparing income by hour, even with COVID, the income hasn't decreased and may even have increased based on hours open rather than gross. Donation of books and CDs are up, and apparently good stuff coming in. And they're increasing the number of days of opening by 1 Tuesday, and perhaps going to Saturday in the future, in the near future, we hope. And the other good, interesting thing is the bookstore is going to be a movie set on June 20th. A local filmmaker is coming in to do a film, and that will be available on YouTube, apparently. And finally, there was one thing that came up that I need your help on, Greg. It was pointed out they're donating about 300 books a month to the Women's Club Little Library. And I know nothing about the Women's Club Little Library, and Googling didn't help me at all. So what's the story? Any idea?
I must admit that I'm not on the Women's Club. I'm not sure. I know that they were donating to Clackamas Bookshelf. Some of their things. Denise, do you know anything about?
Linda has for some time been providing books for many different little libraries. And anytime someone requests them, she'll drive boxes of books over to them. So just a way to, for a while, they had a pretty big backup or a big inventory. So it was a way to help.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And that's my report.
All right, thank you, Larry. I appreciate that, and especially since this is your first one, kind of feeling your way. So thank you for representing us in that important venue. Are any other communications needed at this time? Great. Well, in terms of future agenda items, I know that David wants us to continue to think and talk about identifying and reaching the different populations in our library service areas. So please, if you haven't given David some feedback about that, do so. He's still open to that. And then come with your questions, comments, on ideas for the next meeting, which will be on June 9th. So is there any information for the good of the order? Hearing none, I guess we can call the meeting adjourned at 6:29 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
you.
Thank you. Have a good month.
Always a
Have a good
pleasure
month.
to experience your support of our library. So thank you very much. Thanks, Greg and Denise, for giving us your time. Thank you.
Oh, thank you guys so much.